Hi guys, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. Dr. Uche here, your Dr. Booktuber. If you are here for the first time, welcome. It's so great to have you. I come here to review books I am reading, to inspire you on your reading journey, and also to connect with like-minded people. I love discussing books. Love that. If you're coming back, welcome back. It's good to have you, and I hope you will engage and tell me what you are reading as well, and perhaps that'll inspire my next review. So again, before we even move ahead, please go ahead and hit subscribe and hit the bell so you'll know when I upload new videos. I love hearing from you, and I hope that you will be able to follow my reviews as they come. And so let's dig in. The last I read was The Personal Librarian. The Personal Librarian. I loved this book. Different sort of book. Semi-autobiographical, not autobiographical, semi-biographical. A mixture of real and historical fiction, centered around a young woman who was born, make sure I'm saying it right, she was born Belle Marion Greener. Belle Marion Greener, to a prominent African-American family, father, one of the first, if not the first ever Black man who graduated from Harvard, who was admitted to Harvard as an experiment. Oof. Mother from a pretty famous or well-to-do Black American family called the Fleets of Washington, D.C. Born very light-skinned, extremely light-skinned, so much so that she was able to pass into the white community. I've talked about this before on this channel. I believe there was another book I read that talked about passing. So to my non-American audience, passing involves somebody who has an ambiguous appearance, so much so that you could pass for another ethnic group. And so in passing, somebody actually assumes another identity and so-called passes into another ethnic group. So historically, it mostly has been very light-skinned Black Americans passing into the white community. Now, the concept of light-skinned enough to pass as white may seem strange to my non-American audience, but if you consider that historically in America there was the one-drop rule, so even a drop of African blood made you not white. So you could have these people who were, ancestrally more white than black. They were perhaps they had 1 out of 16 grandparents or 1 out of 16 ancestors black, and 15 out of 16 were white. And so you can imagine these folks looked pretty white, but they were considered black according to the one-drop rule. And so these were the people who were able to pass into the white community at a time when it was advantageous to be white, to live as a white person, as far as socioeconomics, as far as opportunities in society, as far as advancement, as far as education, at a time when being black meant very much was not available to you. Quite frankly, you were not even safe. Your life was in danger in many parts of the country at the time. So one starts to understand how certain people, and this is post-emancipation, certain people passed into the white community because there were advantages. So let's come back to the main character in this book. Belle Marion Greener, born into this prominent family, but her father, by virtue of his experiences, becomes active in civil rights, in championing for equality for the Black community. it just so happens that the mother has a very nasty experience at a particular university where her father had been posted. And so she learns quite early that as much as she would rather not, she learns that it is very advantageous for her children to live as white people. So she starts making efforts to that end. She lists the family as white in a census. And when her husband, Belle's father, realizes this, he explodes. It's a big argument. And we get to see that the couple are now, a previously very loving couple, eventually start to drift apart because they can't seem to reconcile this issue, whereby the wife, as much as she doesn't like it, but she realizes the advantages of living as white, and she starts moving in that path. And the husband absolutely refuses that. He works in civil rights. He cannot make peace with his family now living as white, when his whole life so far he's been trying to champion equality and champion the cause of the Black community. So the father, Belle's father, leaves home. He basically abandons the home and is separated from his wife. Turns out he ends up actually overseas and marries another woman, a Japanese wife, I believe, when he lived in Russia, is my recollection, and has children with her. But whatever the case, Belle Marion Greener becomes Belle da Costa Green. So in this book, it is clear, and when I read about the actual person this book is written about, is based off of the person whose life this book is based on, I learned that she actually tried to explain away her somewhat dark appearance. So even as a white woman that she was passing as, she had a little bit of some dark features, is my understanding. And so she explained it by saying that she had a Portuguese grandmother. And so some of you may know that in Southern Europe, some of the folks there are somewhat darker. They would still be called Caucasian, but somewhat darker in complexion, especially as you go towards South Italy and so on. So she explained that away as having a Portuguese grandmother. Whatever the case, we learned pretty early. That's one thing I like about this book. It doesn't beat about the bush, about the issue it's actually talking about. You learn pretty early that Belle spends time at Princeton and learns to be a librarian. And then she meets up with a nephew of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan, a famous banker and financier that people, my American friends here would probably be very familiar with, the J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. So she gets familiar with the nephew. The nephew now recommends her to J.P. Morgan, the man himself, as a personal librarian, because J.P. Morgan turns out to be somebody who collects books, exotic, highly valued books, valued by virtue of the age of the book or the content, like one of the first Bibles, or, that sort of things, these things roaming around Europe and very ancient societies like that. So he actually spent a huge chunk of his money going around the world collecting these treasures. And he also collected art. And so Belle becomes employed by J.P. Morgan, and over, I think 4 decades as she works with him. As I recollect, when I read about J.P. Morgan, I want to say he died in 1913. And Belle worked for him probably about 10 years or thereabouts. So she collects all these amazing pieces for him. She becomes his curator. She becomes the main person at this bank, at the Pierpont Morgan Library, and she does a phenomenal job. She becomes quite famous in certain circles as a very astute collector, a very talented, negotiator as far as acquiring pieces. She went all the way to Europe. I think she had at least several trips to Europe to collect things on behalf of the Pierpont Morgan Library. And when you look at the literature, because I'm not a New Yorker, I never lived there, I had to look it up. Apparently the library is still there. So she collects all this stuff, and the old man dies in 1913, and his son, I believe Jack, takes over. And J.P. Morgan has developed quite a liking to this librarian, and he left her $50,000 in his will. And he also declared in his will that she must continue in her position as a director of that library. And she later then convinces Jack that J.P. Morgan wanted this library, this amazing collection, to become, rather than just a private thing for the family, to move more into the public sphere, where all the stuff collected over years would be available to the general public, to researchers, to historians. So that transition is made, and she becomes the director of this now public Pierpont Morgan Library. And she makes the headlines of many newspapers, becomes a very famous professional woman for her time, a woman who worked and earned good money. I think they mentioned in some places she earned more than many professionals. And her family benefits because she's living as a white woman. Now, mind you, she would not get any of this if anybody knew she was even one drop black, right? People suspected, but I think they never quite had proof. And she was very careful to never say that to anyone. She never divulged a secret, not even to a certain man, Bernard Berenson, that she became involved with over the years. And when you read about the real Belle da Costa Green, you learn that indeed she had an affair with such a person. But my understanding is she never even made it. She never even gave up that secret to that man. So nobody knew, and she lived her life as a white woman. And I think she died as a white woman. And it looks like it was after the fact that the real story of her life became obvious and actually became known. And now I believe the Pierpont Morgan Library honors her. I believe there's a particular, for example, there's a bust of her that stands in some part of the library, and there's a particular showing of aspect of her life and her work in the library and whatever. So a very big name. I was reading and I read about the real person, and indeed she actually has quite a name in that sort of part of the country. So now that's all the glitz and glamour of what she did. But the most sad aspect is the challenges she went through trying to live as a white person, trying to live as what she was not seen as. Like, how do you decide that somebody who's 1/16 black is black and not white, right? Like, people could debate that outside of the US, where there was the one drop rule, right? How black do you have to be black? But whatever the case, she was seen in her society as a black woman because she had even one drop of black blood, and she was acting as a white woman. So it posed a lot of challenges. For example, I believe she had a brother who was much darker, and she struggled being seen in public with him because it raised a lot of questions about her background. There was a particular daughter of J.P. Morgan, Anne, I believe, who didn't get on very well with her. It looked like J.P. Morgan's son got on well with her, but not the daughter. And maybe he had other children. And she always alluded to, I hear you have tropical roots, trying to catch her at her game. But it never quite became clear how much Anne knew or didn't know in the book. But the challenges, the difficulty, saying she would never have children because what if she has a child who turns out to be darker than she is, who, sort of spills the beans by their appearance, right? So that sort of life, my goodness, I cannot wrap my head around living that sort of life, being what you are not, or so contrary to what you're seen as in your community. But and that is not because I'm a better person, right? I come from a place of privilege where I never had anybody question who I am, and I was allowed to be, or well, not allowed. I was who I am, right? I didn't ever have to try to be something else. So, one walks away feeling enormous sadness at what she had to deal with. But then amazement at how she managed to make the best of her situation, as horrible as it was. So I like that the book doesn't beat around the bush. Like early on, she immediately becomes a personal librarian for JP Morgan. I had thought that I was going to take a while to get to the point where she became the librarian, but it was pretty quick. And the book is really more about her life as the librarian, not so much her negotiating to become the librarian. I liked it. Different take. I haven't read historical fiction. No, I haven't reviewed historical fiction here in a while. So it was different. But yet I loved it. I love being able to go back then and read about the actual person and learn about her life and see how she is being honored years and years and decades after her death. I wonder if she had, or if she has family still surviving. I'm guessing she probably does because she had siblings and her siblings probably had children. So perhaps there are some people out there who have relationship to or are related to Belle Marion Greener or Belle DaCosta Green, whatever you choose to call her. But that's it. That is The Personal Librarian. I absolutely enjoyed reading about it, and I hope you may consider reading it. And if you do, I hope you'll engage and leave a comment. Whatever the case, I love to know what you're reading about. So leave a comment below, hit subscribe, and hit the bell so that you'll know when I upload new videos. And as always, take care of yourself, and I look forward to coming back here to review my next read with you. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays if there is something else you celebrate around this time of the year. I believe I'll probably connect again after the Christmas break. Take care, stay well, and be safe. Bye-bye.